we're getting our, if you notice on the first floor, we're getting our security and kind of front desk that we've been talking about for a little while put in. That's not a reaction to any new events or anything like that. We've been working on it for quite a while. But to have really more customer service focused, to have someone at the front door helping us get to the right place and let our security be the security, not the security and the front desk. And so that was something that we've been talking about since I've been here. And so that'll help us set up, should help our citizens and certainly give some extra clarity for folks of where they need to be. Update City Administrator, we should have something to you guys in the next 24 hours. Obviously, the hope was to get you, something today, probably first thing in the morning, just finishing up final HR stuff. So not so excited to share the news with you, but I would say give us probably till tomorrow morning. We're going to release out to you guys. We don't want to say something prematurely as the HR procedures take place. Obviously, excited to bring this person on, and I think will be a huge asset to our team. So more to come on that. The groundbreaking for the concourse at Pensacola International Airport is scheduled for next Wednesday morning, October 15th. It'll be at 9 a.m. Obviously, a huge complex project, and when you're planning something of this magnitude, it doesn't really seem real until you start tossing dirt and all of that. And so we're going to be moving a lot of it, and it'll happen in phases, but we continue to be on track for 27. Also, we got some great news last week. All three bond rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, Fitch, and Kroll, released their credit ratings for the airport. And for the first time in the history of the airport, all three gave it an A+ bond rating. So certainly, huge congratulations to the airport, to the team. There's a lot that goes into that. So you have as high rated and well run on the financial side airport as you could have in the country. And so we're certainly proud of that. And what does that mean for the taxpayer? It means you're borrowing at a lower interest rate, and we're able to get a project like a terminal done for less expensively because of that strong rating. And so that has an impact on the taxpayer and on the passengers that use our airport, because at the end of the day, all the expenses can help drive costs up, and if you can lower expenses, it'll help drive costs down. So that's very important. October 1st marked the beginning of the parking pass program. We've had 113 city resident discount passes already approved. We have 59 senior passes approved, so that process is starting. And there's an online process to do it, and we're putting the finishing touches on some how-to videos about how to walk through all of that on the city's YouTube page. They'll also be on the Park Pensacola website and then shared through our social media channels. So try to make it as easy as possible to get everybody signed up. And I want to reiterate, those two passes are specific to city residents. Again, the folks that are already helping pay for infrastructure improvements downtown is who you're prioritizing in terms of making sure that we lower any financial burden of using downtown on the folks that are already paying taxes to help support downtown. So if you want to go to the Park Pensacola website, there's even a way to put in your address. Some of those areas up in the north part of the city, we always say, do you have a black garbage can or a green garbage can? That's the best way to tell. But if you're not exactly sure if you're in the city limits or not, we even have a tool on our Park Pensacola website where you can plug your address in, and we can tell you if you're inside the city limits. Update to the Main Street drainage project. The contractor working on the intersection of Main and B will reopen by the close of business this Wednesday. So by the end of the day tomorrow, we should have Main and B right there in front of Joe Patty's should be back open again. We were shooting for late September. There were some weather delays that took place that have caused some issues. Excited to put the groundbreaking at Reeves for the Pallet shelters yesterday. We had a good program there. They're going to be taking on 14 units. And I was even more excited to hear that the intent is to have them up and running before Thanksgiving. So that was part of the benefit of using these particular pallet shelters, is that they can be built very, very quickly. And that is a partnership with Reeves. It's a partnership with our COC and Serene, who they help pay for some of the infrastructure to put those in. If you recall, the $1 million that we put towards pallet shelters, those were for shelters alone. That was not for electrical, plumbing, those types of things. So these agencies, these nonprofits that are taking these on, have to figure out how to bridge that gap. And so I appreciate Reeves stepping up and the COC stepping up. And I'm going off memory. I want to say something to the tune of about $75,000 in infrastructure funded by the COC to get these in. So what that means for us as a community is we got 14 units, climate control, and we're just adding that additional capacity for the unhoused at an already established location. So looking forward to that getting done and getting done quickly. Recycling update, let's see, it says 2,612, that must be 3,612. Yeah, so we're up to 3,612 recycling customers. And then for September, 44 tons of recycling is processed. The total to date is over 100 tons, and the contamination rate holds steady at 7%. So excited to continue to see that significantly stronger efficiency when it comes to recycling. Reminder on the Land Development Code Workshop, that would be at City Hall, let's see, Monday, 5:30 in Hagler Mason, and the open house is from 8:30 to 12:30 on Tuesday. So where we are now, we've already got a draft out. Our staff has looked at it. There's community stakeholders that have looked at it. This is now going back out to the public to look at this particular draft. So just another moving the ball forward with getting the land development code all overhauled and in a better place. And so this is another public engagement opportunity. Let's see. Obviously, I know you're going to ask questions about the reaction to DOGE. My initial reaction is how appreciative I am for, I believe there was 47 people in the city involved in this process throughout 47 different employees. We've given about 11,500 files. We've shared metadata for 60,000 plus emails. And the mathematicians in us have figured out if you actually take every single document, print it out that we have shared, it'd be about 50 miles long. So that's a lot of work that had to happen in a very quick amount of time, back in August and with follow-ups in September. So it's, certainly want to give a huge thank you to our staff. In terms of reaction to, I'm not going to get heavy into that because I haven't seen a report, and we haven't heard a date or a timeline on a report. So I've heard the same things you guys have heard, and I heard them at the same time you heard them. So you saw our response. Certainly, we stand behind that. That the Sanger is profitable. That the welcome sign was paid for and agreed upon with state funds and no city funds. So you guys saw all of that, and so that's really our statement to this point. I don't think we're going to speculate on a report we haven't seen or a timeline we haven't seen, at this point. And so, that would probably be the extent of what we can comment on. And certainly, if we were to see a report or something changes, more information comes forward, then certainly we'll react accordingly. So that is pretty much everything I've got, and happy to take your questions.
Mayor, I'll ask first question.
Yeah.
On the DOGE issue, did it surprise you to hear that announcement at a press conference and not receive this report yet?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I would think, again, and not so much, having hurt feelings over not getting an update, but it goes back to what was my first thought is, we had a team stop and drop what they were doing, 47 people. 60,000 emails, 50 miles of paperwork, that had to be done very, very quickly. And that's not a complaint that it had to be done quickly. I just mean that's a testament to the folks that are working here of how much information that we've provided. So, I mean, I guess surprising in the sense that obviously we would love and expect to hear and maybe even attempt to clarify some things that hey, we saw this and we have a concern with this. And by the way, they've done that in previous. To give them credit, DOGE has done that
previously on other topics. None of the topics that were discussed publicly, but on other issues. Oh, let me correct that. One of them was the equity survey. They had asked for some follow-up on that. We had a meeting and provided anything that they asked for. And so, yeah, I guess I was a little surprised, and especially given the fact that, we had other information that might make that, sound a little different or be positioned a little differently. But they've got their effort going, and they're doing it the way they want to do it, and all we can do is answer any questions that we have. And it goes back to what I said at the beginning. We got nothing to hide here. We've got no issues. We're forensically audited every year. We stand behind the decisions that we make. Doesn't mean that we'll always, as I said before, doesn't mean that we're all going to always agree. That one set of folks might agree on this being a priority or not, and another set might be the opposite. But at the end of the day, I stand behind the efforts that we make to be smart with the taxpayer dollar here, and we'll continue to work collaboratively with anyone at the state that has any questions about it.
They haven't given any kind of timeline when they would release it, or
no?
Okay.
Yeah. We have no additional information on a report, what a report looks like, when it's coming at this point. And certainly, if we do hear that, we'll let you know.
Well, Mayor, with them to misfire on the three things they named to the city, what's the method? Should the public trust what DOGE comes out with?
Well, I mean, I'll let you guys speculate on that. All I can say is, and by the way, let's take the Sanger issue and set DOGE aside. On the other issues that are being talked about the Sanger, that was already a misperception locally that the city gives $150,000. The problem is you got to just read the budget a little more detailed and say, well, yeah, it gives $150,000, but you got to also see what comes in, and so we're proud of it. It's not easy to run a public facility, one that historic and that ornate, and to be able to run it at a profit. I mean, we're proud of that, and it's a testament to the operator and to a good agreement that makes sense, and is one that we've been in for 2 decades. So does it lose credibility around the state? I haven't paid close enough attention to what they put out that's correct or not correct, or anything like that. I can just speak to, obviously we felt there was some additional context that was needed about a welcome sign, about the Sanger, about the equity survey, and we shared that, and they have their right to share information that they want to, and certainly we're gonna, if we feel like it's not the full picture, then we're gonna exercise our right to tell our side of the story, and we can go from there. Yeah.
Mayor, Chris Flatte, the CEO of Florida West, gave a presentation to the county commissioners this past week.
Okay.
And one thing he said stuck out. He was talking about their plans for Tech Park, how they were going to replat it, and they've done all the geotech they need. But he said, we are reserving a number of acres for a structured parking garage. You obviously been in those conversations. Would you share with us what he meant by that in your mind, and how far along are we on this district folding the Tech Park into the Bay Center project and all that?
I'll speak from the city perspective. I don't want to speculate on what Florida West's priorities are or what they want to do, but from our perspective, I support that in this way. It's pretty simple. If we all assume that regardless of what the second facility is going to be at the Bay Center, whether it's going to be a conference center, whether it's going to be a sports facility, an ice rink, all these different things that have been discussed, the common denominator is that if you build something in the parking lot, you lose parking. and you will now have an additional facility with fewer parking spaces than you had when you only had one facility. So one place that the meteor is streaming quickly towards, we're going to need new parking there regardless of what ends up happening. And so I think that's a very prudent decision to say, hey, not only could this help facilitate the parking needs of future expansion of the Bay Center, but you know what, it's also not a bad thing for someone to build a building at the Tech Park. Because right now there's not enough parking to support any office building, any of that of any size and scale. Forget the Bay Center, just the Tech Park alone doesn't have enough parking for any substantive size investment is going to have to go self-park it, or they're going to have to use additional acres to park next to it, or whatever the case may be. So I think you kill a lot of birds with that stone. I think you really can say, hey, future expansion, a conference center, and maybe a more palatable, more attractive investment opportunity for someone, because you'd have that parking on site. So that's certainly something we'd entertain, and a conversation that we'd be willing to have in terms of partnering on that. As this project moves forward, still in the early stages, but I'm definitely a supporter of that aspect of it, both in support of the tech park itself and in support of whatever future growth that happen at the Bay Center.
Mayor, I got a couple questions from the newsroom.
Okay.
2 items before council this week. 2 people seeking a lien, or lien forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
The one says she didn't know about the lien before buying. The other wants a lien in exchange for building multiple affordable housing units on the site. And in both cases, it's noted that the city doesn't currently have a code enforcement lien relief or a reduction policy in place. Is there one in the works? And can you talk about the need for it?
Yeah. So yes, when we got here, there has been no lien release, and we've been really overly lenient. And the thing I think about is we've got hardworking code enforcement folks that stay on it, that have to go and deal with when you're going to levy a code enforcement fine, that's not usually a real positive conversation happening at the door. And so what had happened historically is when you have no plan, everything fits it, right? So then someone would call the city and they'd say, well, I bought this building, even though I bought it at a discount because there's a lien on it, but city, if we ask nicely, will you come, take off the lien? I felt that's disrespectful in some ways to the work of our code enforcement office, and also just it's a little bit disingenuous to the citizen, right? What are the rules of the game here? If you want a lien release, what should it look like? And so actually we've pulled the second one, the first one you described, item number 7 was pulled yesterday because of that exact point. To delineate between the two that you just mentioned. The one on Cervantes Street, where they're saying, here's a building that's been blighted for years, and not only are we going to restore the building, we're adding 6 units. We talk about housing in this press conference, it feels like every week. If you are bettering the city and you're increasing units, that makes sense. And we're not actually even forgiving the liens, it's suspending them until they do what they say they're going to do. So when they show up with the 6 units and give us proof that they've done it, then it gets forgiven. Not forgiven on the front end, which has been the historic, hey, I promise I'll redo this building, just waive the liens, and then you waive the liens, it's gone, and it turns out it gets flipped or it never gets redone. So we're trying to put some teeth back into, we're not trying to be overly difficult, and we don't want blighted buildings, we don't want things that are sitting there forever, but there's also a little bit of a cottage industry of going and buying homes that have liens on them, and because there's no rules, if you come and ask nice enough, at least historically, if you come and ask nice enough, you get it waived and then you go flip the house. That's not what we're trying to support. We're trying to support, so I like the idea of hey, if you want your liens waived, how are you adding more bedrooms? Are you adding more units? What's the investment to the city for the city to waive this fee? So yes, we've been working actually really for the better part of a year and a half on an overall policy. We've got a draft of it, and the final stages is I just want a little bit more teeth in this should not be a program used to help make a flipping house scenario more profitable. That's not why you waive a code fine. You waive a code fine for the betterment of the community. And so I think those 2 examples, and I'm not blaming, if the person didn't know, they didn't know, I certainly have to take them at their word, but the other project is taking a blighted building for years and actually making a net improvement to the community, that there's now more units there. And so that's the type of thing we want to see. So we are at the kind of the finish line. These were going to be kind of 2 pilots of that, but we've got some last minute changes we may want to make on the policy itself. So you will see a policy at some point in a council meeting this year, and perhaps as soon as the next council meeting, but worst case scenario probably in November. Yeah.
Mayor, I'm going to talk for a minute about pro soccer.
Uh-huh.
There was news recently that the largest soccer league in the county, I'm not going to name any names, had moved their biggest tournament of the year, the Blue Angels Classic, to Foley, because of lack of capacity to host something. I think they were bumping up against what Pensacola Sports was doing out there with the SEC tournament. But so USL had come down during the spring and said, we're interested in this. The city said, we'll help in any way we can. You hosted a meeting with some of the USL executives and some local people not quite a month ago. Could you give us a readout on that meeting? And
Sure.
Where do you think this all stands?
Yeah, I think there's two, I would encapsulate it this way. There's two significant portions of this USL study. One is the community outreach, potential ownership outreach, things like that, that are going to make the league successful. And that's due diligence that we help, whether we facilitate a meeting or they ask for a phone number, or they've reached out to countless people, from Pensacola Sports to just general folks in the community. So we've done that not only a month ago. We actually have a standing meeting every 2 weeks on Zoom with their staff that I'm in, and just kind of going over that. The second is, the elephant in the room is, where's the facility going to go? That's a whole nother conversation. So there's really two concurrent things happening right now. One is this: can we get our arms around, and do we have the comfort of a city that's supportive, that there's sponsors that could be supportive, that type of due diligence that the league is doing and we're helping facilitate. And then there's this, bigger conversation of, you got to build a soccer stadium somewhere. Their model is to do a 3,500 to 5,000 seat stadium downtown. It's not, somewhere out on the outskirts. I mean, that's what the model that they're actively, aggressively engaging in right now around the country. And where does that go, and where do we put it? So I think the conversations have been good. Certainly, we're still in conversations with them now. I feel like that on the first box, I feel like that's a pretty good check. The fact that we're still talking about it, that they would have already gotten a pretty good sense that there wasn't the support here. Those conversations probably would be waning. But again, the second part is, how do we strategize around finding the right acreage in the right place? And I agree with them, what they've seen in their other markets is it's a little more successful. It's not just about bringing a team here and then playing in a temporary facility for 4 or 5 years. You kind of lose the momentum, that I think in a perfect world for everybody, you would start that team in a new facility, or maybe 1 year before, you play at Maritime or something like that, and then you go into a facility. You don't want to drag out for multiple years playing it at at a high school stadium or out on 10 Mile Road or something like that, in terms of the long-term health and success. You want to kind of build on the excitement. So I agree with that. I mean, from just my previous experience, I think you need to kind of get that momentum going early. But that also takes a lot more legwork on the front end, which means you got to go find where you're going to put it, property. What's that look like? What's the funding mix look like? So there's still, I think there's probably a little more work to do on that side than there really is on the community side of things at this point.
Has there been any speculation in these meetings about the Blue Wahoo Stadium becoming a multi-purpose stadium with enhancements and additional public money coming into remodeling it or expanding it?
Yeah, not a lot of conversation, because there's a couple challenges. First of all, actually, interestingly enough, one of the best franchises in the USL is out of Louisville. We're trying to get up there at some point just to see their facility and see how it operates. They're one of the prize franchises. It's probably the most valuable franchise in terms of dollars and cents. They built a beautiful stadium. They revitalized this downtown kind of meatpacking area right outside of downtown Louisville, and they've just done a good job of building a fan base, building a sponsor base, and all of that. It's hard to say, speculatively right now. First of all, where a stadium may go, I think they just focus on that. I think that's the most important part of it. But secondly, I think we need to learn a lot from some of these other, teams, in that's made them successful, how you build an ownership group, how you do, all of those types of things. So we're going to try to get up there and see kind of what right looks like, up in a franchise like that. The season's kind of coming to an end now, but we'll just see what happens.
Have you sensed an appetite locally or sort of in the area of people who have the means to invest in something like this? Is there a growing appetite, or are they being brought along? I mean, what's your sense of the mood of people who can finance a franchise?
Yeah, no, I think there is. And the USL has a requirement of having a certain level percentage of local ownership, which I also agree with. That you don't want just out of town owners or out of the country owners owning a team. You want someone invested, and that works two ways. Local ownership helps you get local sponsorship because you have trust in those people. And so, yeah, I mean, there's folks that not only have the means. I think there's folks that have the soccer understanding. There's folks that own soccer teams right now in the city that might have the means to do that. So, but again, I think less of our conversation right now. I feel perfectly confident that we have a market that can support it. Go back to let me answer your question better in the last part with Maritime. Maritime has a pitcher's mound issue because the season runs through baseball season. In Louisville, they actually invented a hydraulic pitcher's mound that you could take in and out quickly instead of having to rebuild it all the time. So that can be solved, but their bigger issue is that you have an east-west field, and FIFA doesn't like an east-west field because you're playing into the sun and out of the sun. And I don't know that even a substantive overhaul of Maritime Park would allow for any other, obviously they made all of those enhancements for football, for UWF to go east and west, but that's certainly not an ideal setting. Also, it's too temporary from a seating standpoint. I mean, what has been successful in places like Spokane, Washington, and Colorado Springs for this league is having this kind of intimate 3,500 seat stadium built for soccer, and it could be for football. And my vision would be, I think it'd be great for, let's take some of these high school stadiums that need, help that haven't been invested in a long time, and let the kids play on $1 million scoreboard somewhere downtown. And that Birmingham does that, Tallahassee does that. Many communities will do kind of a shared home stadium. That's a better experience. So,
point its finger almost directly at what I've heard already at Pensacola High School, their property up there, which they've got plenty of it, and the alignment is correct, but the funding is still, who does this?
Yeah, I mean, again, one of the things that should we talk, I would certainly want to have a conversation with the school district about, they have funding for facilities long term, and before you throw, $1 million or $2 at this and $1 million or $2 at that, $1 million or $2 at that, does that make more sense to be in a partnership? That conversation hasn't even taken place yet. That's all speculative, but those are the types of things we're going to be looking at when it comes to wanting to build a facility. But again, finding the right space for it that makes sense downtown. I think that, to your initial question, I think that right now is the clear challenge versus community support, investor support. I can certainly speak on our side. We feel very, very confident on that side, and we've gotten indications from USL that they feel very confident that this is a market that they are willing to invest in. But it comes down to the stadium, and I agree with them. Having a partial stadium situation, a temporary bleacher situation, is not ever going to be the same as having, the facility that and that model that's worked all over the country for them, which is this 3,500 to 5,000 seat downtown stadium, mixed use. You could do festivals in it. You could do high school football in it. You could do all sorts of things like that. And I think that would be the direction that they would want to go. And I agree with them that would be the best for the long-term health of that franchise coming.
Mr. Mayor, following up on that, I think we're 6 or 7 months into their year-long due diligence period, or that they said they're going to do. Do you think they're going to take the entire year, or do you think we can hear something sooner?
That's a good question. I could go either way right now. And remember, the due diligence period is really just an exclusivity on our side. We just can't go to another soccer league and say, and so it's not overly burdensome if they needed more time than that. It's not overly burdensome to the city to continue, and why wouldn't we continue that conversation if they needed more time? But again, my hope is over the next 6 months that we get additional clarity on where a potential facility might go, negotiations on that. And I don't mean that I don't think the expectation of the league nor the city would be we have to have every dollar of a $30, $40, $45 million stadium decided and accounted for, but it's more where is it going to go? Is that palatable to the league? Is it something that makes sense for the city? And then you could get aggressive into those discussions because there's so many moving parts to how a stadium like that's going to be funded, including by who are the owners. I mean, they're going to be putting up money, around this facility. So this is not just going to be a city burden, and certainly, I covered sports long enough to know that if there's an expectation that the city is going to fully fund a stadium, then we can end this conversation right now, and they know that. Whether that's the league, whether that's private ownership, whether that's the school district, any of those options, but this will not be a fully funded municipal stadium if it were to happen. So I don't expect in the next 6 months at all that we would have every dollar detailed, but can we find the right space and can we feel pretty good about the direction to allow those type of negotiations? Those negotiations will certainly be beyond those 6 months, but I think we're all in the same boat that we want to start getting some clarity around that probably in the next 6 months, and hopefully we've got something to point to say this is the way we want to go, and let's explore that further.
But do you think at least the city will be involved in some way in providing money?
Oh yeah. For sure. I don't expect it to be fully private, but in what form? Do we build a parking structure and that be the investment? That so those types of things. And I don't want y'all to speculate. I'm not proposing that I go to the tech park. So that's already been. I've already heard that it's been tossed around the water cooler in some of the buildings downtown. That's what we're trying to do. We're not, because you'd have the same problem at the tech park as you do at Maritime. You'd have to go east and west. You'd have the same problem in the parking lot of the Bay Center that you'd have because you need 500 feet ish north and south, and neither of those provide that. So. All I'm saying is, yes, I fully expect the city would be making an investment into something of this magnitude. What it would be and how much, way too early to speculate on that. And it could be in other aspects. It could be that the private side finances this and the city finances parking. Those types of things. But it could go any which way. But yes, Jim, I would fully expect if the city's going to end up with a $45 million stadium, I don't think they're going to get it for zero, but the expectation is it will not be for $45 million either. That there's going to be some participation on many sides for if this is going to come to fruition.
Mayor, following up, you said 35 to 45 million. How does that translate to the seating capacity? What size? You had mentioned earlier the 30-some thousand.
No, 3,500 to 5,000. Seating capacity, so smaller. Again, for perspective, for a hockey game, I think the Bay Center's 7,500-ish if you're not using the floor, like for a concert. So that's the model. And again, the league doesn't just talk about it; they've done it all over. Where this model's working, where it kind of requires this downtown stadium to have that vibrancy, and in some places, investment around the stadium, whether it be hotels and restaurants, that type of model you're seeing all the way up to the highest levels of professional sports. I think people use the Braves example as one. It was a large scale development, not just the baseball stadium. So that they haven't done that everywhere, but I think that's why they like the downtown model and why it's worked for them and why it's worked for the league owners. So far, and again, the Louisville example being, a really good one, probably the strongest one. And so, that 3,500 to 5,000, that they've obviously got a rough idea of what that stadium costs. But listen, it's like whether you buy a house or buy a car or buy anything else. How many luxury boxes you want changes the price. How many seats you want changes the price. Or if there's already existing infrastructure around it, it could lower the price. If the locker rooms could be in a building somewhere and they don't need to be constructed under the stadium, you can save money. So it's too unique to say exactly what the price would be, but that's kind of the general ballpark of a stadium in this league of that size. And I'm sure that you could spend $145 million, if you wanted to, but that's kind of that kind of $45 million area is probably kind of the going price for the level of stadium that they're putting in like communities.
Do you think there's adequate land downtown that meets those criteria? Vibrancy, development?
Maybe, yeah.
But we know where they are, right? I mean, you know where they are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're working on getting creative about it. I think, clearly there's not an open plot of land sitting somewhere ready to take construction of a stadium, or you guys would already be asking me about it. Why not put it here? Why not put it there? There isn't an obvious place to put it, but it just means we'll probably have to do a little more legwork, and we're looking into, some options that may make sense, but nothing of any substance, at this point. And again, it's not, to your question, it's not as cut and dry as there's a perfect amount of acreage going north and south in the heart of our downtown. Obviously, people speculate about EC Way. Both of those sides of that parcels have been accounted for at this point. Obviously, the construction happening, and then I believe there'll be additional. Yeah, exactly. And then there'll be the residential. I think there's another residential proposal on the other half. So we'll see. I guess that's my job and our job to try to find that space you're talking about.
Mayor, on the Welcome to Pensacola sign, can you take me back to the planning for that?
Mm-hmm.
And was there at any point a plan for the city to pay for this sign? I'm just trying to get an understanding of why the state, it just seemed like an easy thing they could have looked at and saw themselves and said, oh, okay, it looks like FDOT and others paid for this.
With 47 people involved, I don't know if there was a specific question. I'm not aware that there was even a specific question. I know there wasn't one about the Sanger during the process. I don't want to say for sure that there wasn't one about the welcome sign. I was not made aware of that, if that during that audit process that anything like that came up. But yeah, just the history of that sign was the Five Flags Pavilion, that no one could really access it. It kind of was built like you could, and the one I grew up driving by all the time had to be taken out for the construction of the bridge. So, as FDOT does in every project, they say, well, if we're requiring because of construction to take out something, then we're required to put something back. Well, when right before I got here as mayor, the FDOT had proposed just this basic clock tower. That was it. There wasn't, no contest, kind of no discussion that I was, and again, maybe there was discussion with the previous administration, but I wasn't aware of any of that. There was kind of just, hey, we knocked that down, here you go, we're going to build this clock tower, in its place. Then I believe right when I was taking over, Mayor Robinson had met with Scott Salas, the architect, and then they had started potentially just designing their own sign. To say, all right, well, if we're not going to do this clock tower, let's just in-house kind of come up with something. And then when I took over, we had said, all right, well, this is going to be 100,000 cars a day are going to go by this, even though we know it's going to take a little longer and it's going to be a little more painful to execute, and a lot more bandwidth from Amy and public works staff and engineers and all of that, but it'll be worthwhile if we come up with something that's a little more memorable than a clock tower or just a simple Welcome to Pensacola sign. So that's how we got there. Obviously, FDOT had been involved in that every step of the way. We couldn't use the money without it. For example, if we had built a sidewalk to go look at it, FDOT wouldn't approve that because you don't want people, rightfully so, from a safety standpoint. So every step of the way, certainly FDOT has been involved, not just in forget cost. Every aspect of this project had to be approved. It's in there right away. It's ultimately. So we're in constant conversation over years of time with FDOT about exactly what we were doing, what it was going to look like, adjustments that they wanted us to make, we made. We proposed things, they accepted, and that was a very positive, amicable experience through that whole thing in terms of something that isn't necessarily easy to pull off. Public contest, something new and different, always takes a little bit of time. So, through all that time, they had allocated this $375,000 initially. That was years before that, to kind of throw at the replacement of the Five Flags Pavilion. And then obviously because of costs and inflation, we went back to them and said, 375, we couldn't really build anything. I do hear a lot of experts out there saying that this sign could be built for $30,000. If they know any contractor that can do it for less than this, to have them please call our procurement staff. But signs, it's hard to build anything that can stand up to wind rating, and the amount of concrete that went in the ground for that to not go anywhere when it's on the water. That's a lot. That was a big part of the cost. So we went back to DOT and said, hey, a few years have gone by, 375 probably wouldn't cut it for anything. Could you help us out? And they did for another 100,000. We kind of split the middle. We knew what the price was going to be, and then the final funds were ARPA funds that had already been allocated previous to this administration, could be used on projects like this. So the net result was there's been not one dime of property tax, city property tax, not one dime of city money that was put towards this specific project. So again, I'm not sure when that came up or where, but again, I think for this and for future things, I want to be clear. If any clarity that's needed or any questions that come up, we're happy to answer them, and we've been an open book on any of this stuff. So if there's other issues in the future that they want to share with us, we're, as they've already done. Again, I want to give them credit. They've done that once already. In these particular issues, the Sanger and the welcome sign, they didn't. But I'm happy to have any conversation and get them any information that they want. I think they just requested how much cash is in the general fund or something like that. They just recently, and so we sent it to them. So,
Are they still actively asking for things like after their audit?
That was the last one that I saw. It was just a single question, something about kind of a cash on hand general fund question, which of course we have a city policy and a city ordinance on a certain level of reserves that has been around for forever. And actually, I've even compared it to other communities in terms, it's 20% of what your normal general fund is, and so that's the cash that we have on hand in the general fund is going to be a reserve like you'd have in case COVID happens, in case a hurricane happens.
Okay, let me ask you a question about what the CFO said at the press conference last week. He was talking about DOGE's methodology.
Okay.
And he said they went back to 2019 and used that as basically a baseline, and then calculated inflation each year, and then looked at the current year's budgets and the delta of that. They were just labeling wasteful spending. They mentioned Orlando was like $190 million. They didn't talk about Pensacola specifically, but do you think that methodology is a serious approach to finding wasteful spending?
I think if the goal of the discussion is to have property tax reform, let's talk about what I believe, and I'm sure you guys would speculate as media, is that if the end game is to have a conversation as cities, as counties, about property tax reform and coming up with realistic property tax reform solutions, it would be hypocritical of me or to say, no, we shouldn't look at that. Sure, we should look at it, and the consequences of all of that. The same way that if we lowered the state sales tax from 6% to 5%, there'd be consequences to that, and what the state can provide and services and all of those things. So, I think we've shown locally in 3 years we're happy to always look at something and not say this is how we've always done it. But I think some of the, and I'm not going to speak to specifically what the CFO is talking about. I think this conversation in general, some of the confusion that's being caused is there's this all or nothing thing where it's being floated about to eliminate property tax, and then there's the presumption is then there's a position from every city government that means no, you can't absolutely touch 1 cent of property tax. I think we all probably realize the truth is somewhere in the middle, or the reality is somewhere in the middle of that, and where does it land? And so what I'm hoping, and I know the legislature's talking about it, is I'm looking forward to getting to the substantive conversation about the direction that we decide to go, and it's not, and certainly DOGE and the state can share that information and go around the state and share that in any way that they like. That is their duty and their right to do that. But I'm looking forward, as a mayor of a local municipal government in the state of Florida, I'm looking forward to the substantive conversation that we have. What do we do for senior citizens who've paid off their house and it's homesteaded? That now we're talking about a relatively small fragment of folks. Are those conversations we should entertain as a state? Yeah, maybe so. But it's this all or nothing kind of rhetoric that I think is not getting us where we're needing to go. I'm just looking forward to having substantive conversation about the realistic balance between being able to fund public safety and what are those mechanisms that maybe make sense in this new wave of conversation about property tax.
Here, last question here. So you got an LDC public meeting coming up here.
Mm-hmm.
What is your message to the public? What should they be looking at, when they come in and they look at something like this?
Yeah.
What do you think is the most transformative, your words, elements of this revision?
Yeah, I think it's not only giving feedback, but I think for our engaged community to get an understanding of the real ramifications of what changes would look like. And the example I always use is the land use being able to put a duplex on a 10,000 square foot piece of property that only allows a ranch style house, because we haven't looked at it since the 70s. And you've heard me say this all the time at State of the City or whatever, is I always say to the crowd when someone says, well, man, not in my backyard, I don't want duplexes or triplex, I don't want a garage apartment, I don't want that in my neighborhood. I always say, well, raise your hand if you've never lived in an apartment. And usually no one raises their hand. And then I say, we all want our kids and grandkids to move home after college. Are they going to afford to buy a house, or are they going to probably live in a garage apartment, or are they going to live in a duplex? And so, and I've been pointing out the most ornate, beautiful quadplexes, triplexes we have were built in North Hill in the 1920s and 30s and 40s. This is not a new concept. This is something our city has done decades ago, almost centuries ago. And so, to me, it's just as valuable when, instead of just hearing, oh man, now they're going to build 2 units instead of 1 next door to my house, across the street from my house, is really understanding what the ramifications and what the requirements are going to be of that. That doesn't mean anybody can do anything they want. We want to preserve character of our communities, of our neighborhoods. So it's more complex than just, can we thicken neighborhoods? I think it's getting a good understanding of exactly what that means, what's required of someone to do that. It's not just do anything that you want. So any LDC is a simple balance of preserving character of your community in terms of what you require, the materials you require, the historic overlays, those types of things, with helping your community be able to grow and helping to solve housing affordability, those types of things. So it's just trying to strike the best balance between those two that we can.
Mayor, the News Journal published some pretty elaborate drawings of Inspired for the community Maritime Park.
Mm-hmm.
Part of a presentation they made to you last month. What was the purpose of the presentation? What were they looking for?
Well, I think the overall purpose was, this is what we're thinking about parcel 4. Meaning, and remember, because that was relatively new, the previous conversations we had with them were about parcel 8 down by the marina as the potential second development site. They have all those parcels under option. So it was more of, hey, Mayor, we're thinking about moving our priority over to 4, and here's what we have in mind. I think that was really the ultimate part of the presentation. Now, as we've said, there's lots of different pieces to that puzzle,
Right.
much different than 3, 6, and 8, because you got to replace the 350 spaces of parking. What does that look like? So the meeting I'm more interested in really it's great to see vision and all of that, but the meeting I'm interested in is the one coming up, which is going to be, tell us how we're going to pay to replace the 350 spaces. What does that public-private partnership look like? Because if you build on 4, the taxpayers had to build.
I mean, they're giving you more plans and they haven't broken ground on anything.
Yeah, well, exactly. And to be clear, we aren't going to be allowing timeline changes on 5 because they're doing 4. Now, there may be some accommodations. If you saw the drawings on 4, clearly it would make sense if they're building a podium on 5 and they get something done on 4 to build the podium on 4. I don't mean that there wouldn't be, if this all goes well and makes sense for the city, that there wouldn't be some maybe changes to the timeline. But I'm a big kind of do what you say you're going to do person. So just because there's some vision for 4, to me, does not allow any foot off the gas on 5. And I know I confirmed this morning that foundational permits have been pulled already for 5. So permits are being pulled now. And per their contract, you guys get the exact date, but it's something like that. There's got to be construction happening in a year, I would say, right now on 5 as it sits.
So are the odds better for a Trader Joe's or for you to file for office?
Yeah, maybe I might do it after Trader Joe's.
Oh,
Yeah. I mean, I would be just enjoying the number one thing I could do to help the city, which I believe, according to Facebook, is to bring a Trader Joe's here. I think is the most. I talk about transformational projects, Rick, all the time. American Magic, Baptist Hospital. I think Trader Joe's is the number one. So yeah, I don't know. Probably the Trader Joe's to answer your question. We'll see. It's an early stage, and as they presented, that isn't exactly what's going to go. It's market research of what types of things could go there. And so, again, I think you have a credible group that knows how to do projects like this of this scale. But we are in the early conversations on 4. I would not, at this point, I would never be able to say confidently 4 is going to happen. It's too early to say because we've got too many things like parking. We've got a $20+ million elephant in the room that needs to be figured out right now before we could say that 4 is going to fly or it's not going to fly. So, but those meetings are scheduled, and certainly everybody's aware of that. And one other factor, Rick, is the staging for 5. Right. That's another complexity to this whole project is you got to put the stuff somewhere for a project of that size. And so what happens on 4, what happens on 3, 6, and 8, what happens to parking for Wahoo's games, there's that you throw another thing into the mix. It's, how do we plot and plan around the actual construction of the Hard Rock and the apartments while we're also dealing with, parking issues on 4.
Here, you say. So Valencia's parking requirements, you say they're going to have to do it themselves? They would not be a part of this consortium down on Lot 4?
No, it's not that they couldn't be. It's just the timing of everything. I mean, when would that parking be done? As it pertains to their construction, and we don't even know what our arrangement's going to be. So I would never exclude any potential future investment. It would make a lot of sense for there to be synergy around a large parking structure, right? Of course, to say, hey, if you're on 7, you're on 8, whatever. If we're already digging dirt, why don't we go ahead and make the parking accommodations we need? So I would never rule that out. I just think the timing of everything right now makes it difficult because how can we promise Valencia 150 spaces in something that we don't even know how we're going to pay for yet? I mean, it would almost be disingenuous for the city to tell them, yeah, no problem, we promise we'll get you parking in here. Well, if it's $30,000, $40,000 a space to build it, we may not want to be providing the spaces that they need in there. So there's just too many unknowns on the garage side for us to be able, at this juncture, to be able to promise them something. It's not that we wouldn't, it's just, I think we have this misalignment of timing right now that doesn't allow it. Now, that doesn't mean that we wouldn't help them, what happens with parcel 6 in the future across the street, could that be some of the parking? So we did not say we are unwilling to help with any parking whatsoever. but they have a certain requirement, according to them, is being pressed by their financing to say, well, if you have 130 rooms, 140 rooms, you need 130 or 140 spaces. That's their business. That's not my decision to make for them. But we just can't get to that full number that they need. So it's not that we want to provide zero. We could make some accommodations, but there's just too many balls in the air right now to promise them 140 spaces. And like most developers do, we just say, hey, ultimately, finding parking is kind of your requirement. I mean, Parcel 5, they found their own parking on Parcel 5. So it's not like we're asking for something unrealistic to say you may need to solve kind of your own parking issue on the site that you have. But so we're willing to work with them. I just too many balls in the air right now to be able to promise them anything.
Mayor, when is the meeting with the development group on Lot 4? And then as far as what your expectations are for any kind of deal with the parking there? Where do you see as far as the city's obligation versus the developer's obligation?
Yeah.
Or how do you reach an agreement?
The meeting's not, we don't have an exact day and time yet, but it's imminent. It's coming. I'm getting updates from them saying, we're almost ready to go, kind of thing. Because what I've asked from them is, you present us with options. What do you, are you guys going to finance it? We make taxes for X number of years. So all I can tell you right now is the city's position is the same with every developer, which is we do the same math you do. And I've got to go to our citizens and our council and defend why this is a value to the city. So we don't have a hard number. There's too many complex aspects to a deal, a public-private partnership like that, that could be the difference between it being palatable for the city and not. And so my position is if we allow a development on 4, clearly a $250-ish million development is going to pay taxes that don't exist now, right? So if you consider that found revenue to the city, we'll see how much property tax is worth next year. But if you consider property tax found revenue that doesn't otherwise exist, then obviously I look at that as to an extent leverageable dollars to go back and say, all right, well we can, we make X every year because this new development now exists. We can clearly use those dollars to help fund the ability to make it exist, right? But we don't want to do that for 80 years. We don't want to do that and remember, when I walked in to this office, the conversation we were having about 5 was abating 75% of the taxes for 10 years and 25% of the taxes for the next 10 years. We abated 0 taxes on 5, 0. So all of that tax revenue for 5 is going back to the citizens. And so we take that seriously and we protect that seriously. But that would be kind of the first element I would be looking for. And then what I hope is we're looking at whether it's E-dates, whether it's Triumph. I mean, if they're going to put an office building in, can we move a high-paying employer that would come and relocate here and be able to leverage Triumph? Those are all things that I'm kind of looking to them to say, what does the funding stack look like on your side? It's not going to just be the city and you. Maybe there's other elements out there that can help make it happen. So I think our obligation, if we allow 4, I look at our obligation as we have 350 spaces out there, we would have to replace 350 spaces. If we talk about Valencia, if we talk about the long-term growth, maybe we talk about 400 or 450, but I think what's being proposed is we're talking about 1,600 spaces, something like that, because of the size of the development. Obviously, that's not something we're looking to fund private parking spaces. We would be looking to fund with the public obligation. So again, early in the conversation, and I'm looking forward to hearing kind of what they're thinking in terms of how we can get the parking structure funded, and we'll go from there. So no set date. I would say probably, not probably, more than likely sometime this month.
And the lease options have expired, correct? So are they looking to extend those yet?
Yeah, and they've shared their desire to extend. They don't formally, the options don't formally expire until we notify. And so if we send a letter, they're over. Even though the date's gone by, they continue to be in place at this point. And obviously, we're going to allow this to play out, in the short term, see where it goes. What I suspect is going to happen is, remember, you've got 4 and you've got staging that needs to happen. Well, if you stage a bunch of steel and wood and materials in the parking lot to build 5, now we displace parkers for Wahoo's, our obligations to the Maritime building, all of that. Well, I would surmise that means on 3, 6, and 8, there's going to be some temporary parking put in. Well, if that happens, then those are leases on that property. Those aren't even options anymore. And that's going to be a short-term lease that would take place because of the need for that. So what I can guarantee you is that, so I don't know which parcels will still be under control of the current group. Obviously 4 clearly would be, or this project wouldn't happen. It's too early to say that, but what I can tell you is it won't be in the same form that it is in now. It's going to probably be moving to either some short-term leases or going back into the pool, if it's something that they feel like, they don't need and they don't plan on developing anytime soon. So I can see that right now, 3, 4, 6, and 8 are all kind of bonded together. I would fully expect that there's going to now be kind of some different agreements based on all of the moving parts of what's happening out there. So we'll see what happens. But that's a part of, yet again, the complex conversation that's happening.
Yeah, Mayor, the Dawson Group floated this idea of a development district where they would finance all of this themselves. And they described a large section of the community of Maritime Park as falling into this potential development district. It included the stadium. It included all of the city leases over there. Would this require the leases be converted?
Yeah.
What have you told that group about? This is a big deal if they go that route.
Yeah, I know that's being discussed. That has not been discussed formally with me yet, other than just kind of hearing through our legal. And I don't have the full understanding of all of the consequences of that, other than, ultimately a CDD, you're going to be taxing yourself, right? If they were to draw one just on their own property, then that would be taxing themselves or their leaseholders. Or, for example, can they charge an extra percentage on every food item? Or those are all of the things, the intricacies of the CDD that I'm not aware of, including whether that we would have to literally sell the property or convey the property over. I do know it becomes, in essence, its own little small government, right? It kind of governs itself, and it can have its own taxing rules and things like that. So again, I know that's on the table, but there has not been a robust presentation or discussion about what that looks like for us. So again, happy to have any conversation they want, and we'll judge that on its merits.
Well, part of that CDD scheme used widely in the state of Florida is that the city CRA would service a portion of that debt that they use to finance their project. Yeah,
well, and again, that's what it goes back to, how we're going to fund the garage, how we I can tell you, to fund 1,600, to bond the CRA to fund 1,600 spaces, is tap our bonding potential, for a long time. So, it wouldn't be something like that. But, I think I mentioned to you when you brought this up before, we talked about, does that make sense at the basin in the long term if we were to end up having
a CDD kind of thing.
Exactly. Right. Especially because the city and county now own the property solely outright right now anyway, whereas opposed to where there's some private and some public. So anyway, again, which way would we go on that, John? I don't know, but I'm happy to have any. I'm willing to always be creative in how we, help make something happen. But at the end of the day, the buck stops with, we're going to do the same math you do, and what's it going to cost the taxpayer, and what does the taxpayer get for their money? That's how we're going to, and that's going to be the bottom line of any of these